Another body laying cold in the gutter. Listen to me. Don't go chasing waterfalls. Please stick to the rivers and the lakes that you used to. I know that you're gonna have it your way or nothing at all. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another Environmental Justice Now. This week, before we start, I want to begin with another land acknowledgement. While we are on a video call and many of us are joining from different places, we want to remind ourselves that we gather on the unceded land of the Indigenous peoples. I'm joining from so-called Richmond, Virginia, and I'm currently located on the land of the Huguenot and the Powhatan people. And if you are unsure whose land you're on and you want to find out, you can visit native-land.ca to find out. I'm so excited to be back with you guys today to reintroduce myself. My name is Hera Azar, and I'm the Communications and Digital Outreach Coordinator here at Virginia Interfaith Power and Light. And today we bring some very exciting news as we launch a new phase of our water campaign. To help us today with these efforts and our Human Right to Water campaign, I'm joined by two staff members who have been here from the very start of VAIPL's campaign, Kadest Gebre and Leah Jones. Hi, Kadest and Leah. How are y'all today?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to be here. I even wore my blue shirt in the name of water.
Yeah, hi Hera and hi everyone. I'm also excited to be here and to continue to talk about, why we're all thirsty for water justice.
Yeah, so on that note, to begin, I want to ask both of y'all, why are you #thirsty for water justice? And why do you care about a human right to water?
Well, I'll go ahead and start. For me, I feel like there are obviously so many reasons to care about a human right to water and to be thirsty for water justice, especially here in the state of Virginia. Um, in particular, just going back to the human right to water and why that's important, I think most importantly, what stands out to me is the fact that this is a common resource, something that we all share, something that we all need is essential for us. It's spiritual, it's necessary for health, hygiene, function of our bodies. Why the fact that someone could not have access to it because of an inability to pay or because of polluted waters, not of their own fault, is ridiculous to me. So that's why I'm so thirsty for water justice. And in the state of Virginia, there are various threats to water access here for some of the reasons being those I just mentioned before. But we'll go into more about that just in a little bit. But right off the bat, those are my top priorities. And I think also what makes a human right to water so important and fighting for a human right to water is that when we think about water issues, a lot of the time we see it from a conservation perspective. Are we saving the fish? Is the water quality good enough for the oysters? But no one's talking so much about people who aren't able to pay their water bills, which means they don't have access to water and aren't able to use their bathroom in their own house in some cases. I'm sure there's plenty of stories all throughout the state about the ways that people are affected by negative threats to water access. And we'll go into that, like I said, in detail as we go through the show today. What about you today?
Yeah, and on top of what Leah has already mentioned on the importance of caring for water quality, but also empowering the folks that are facing threats for water access. I'm thirsty for water justice because I have a lived experience with water in access, right? Today we are talking about how water is a universal solvent. It's the most important resource to all living things on Earth, right? And as many of us know, we use water every day without an issue here in the U.S. But it's easy to forget that on a global scale, having clean water is actually a privilege, right? And so for me growing up, that was one of my experiences as a having a childhood back in Ethiopia, there was moments where there would be water shortages or even water shutoffs consistently for months on ahead, and folks would have to share water as a kind of sacred resource, right? And so that, on top of coming to the U.S. and then living in Virginia and seeing water and access issues when it comes to affordability, and whether it be old and inadequate pipes. I saw how folks are consistently, disadvantaged when they are trying to have access to clean and enjoyable water. So that's why I'm thirsty for water justice and wanting to kind of uprise and bring the issues of water in access to the front of our environmental justice issues, and why I'm excited about our water campaign as well.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think it's really interesting to talk about that global connection to what's happening locally. So I wanted to ask both of y'all as well, what do you see with the water issues happening in Virginia, and do you have any examples to share with us?
Definitely. There's loads of examples that go across the entire state when we see these issues. Some similar issues that exist, but also different ones that exist depending upon the region that folks are in the state. Some of those include pollutants from industry, antiquated water infrastructure, rate increases. These are all threats to safe, clean water for rural communities, low income communities, and communities of color. And the United Nations suggests that the total spending on water and sanitation services, together with any needed alternative source of clean water, should not exceed 3 to 5% of household income. But in many cases across the state, we see that this may be threatened in a lot of cases. People are having water burdens in which they're not able to pay that, and their water bills are much more than 3 to 5% of their overall household income. That's just more generally speaking. But if we want to go more to in depth, specific examples of what we see in Virginia, a really easy one to go into is old infrastructure, like I just mentioned. So old and rusty pipes. We live in a really old state that has a lot of old infrastructure, which means it needs to be updated. And the issue with these old pipes and this old infrastructure is that a lot of the times, one, it could be a source of a pollution itself, which can be a really real issue, seeping into your household water for everyday use, or poor infrastructure, it being old and poorly managing the huge rushes of water that get put into the sewer system or wastewater treatment systems, which also affect our water quality, for those who did not know. I think there are specific examples of this all across the state. We see this as an issue for rural and urban communities. We have a image to share with you all today that shows the difficulty of water access in the Appalachian area of Virginia. Yes, you can see this here. The area is right on the edge. If you look towards the center of the map where the circle is, you see that's the area right on line of Virginia where the states are affected by poor indoor plumbing, poor water infrastructure, right? Which means this is lessening their water quality, meaning people don't have access to water in their house on a regular day-to-day basis. Crazy to think about, right? So this is an issue for rural communities, but it's also a real issue for urban communities as well. And I feel like that's something that we keep seeing popping up as time goes on, just as the issue continues to worsen, and water infrastructure systems, wastewater infrastructure systems need to be updated. This photo here that's up on the screen, if you're able to put it back up, is just a screenshot of a news article that came out just this year, a couple of months ago, talking about an elderly woman who lives in Petersburg, who had to leave her home because of sewage flooding in her house. There was nasty sewage water going through her faucets in the kitchen, in her bathtub. She had to leave her home. And I definitely suggest going back to that article at some point. I definitely recommend going back to that article at some point because it gives you a really great example of the real issues that people are facing. People having to leave their homes that they lived in their whole life because of water infrastructure issues. And on top of that, not being able to afford the fees that it would take to fix it. And in that article in particular, we see that the city itself wasn't even able to update and pay for the repairs. It was actually a donation from neighbors, the community, that allowed that elderly woman to get her infrastructure, her wastewater sewage infrastructure fixed. So that's just one example. I know Kadesh can have some other great ones to share as well.
Yeah, on top of those, and when we're thinking about toxic facilities, landfills can hold hazardous waste that seeps into the ground and threaten the quality of Virginia drinking water. We already have multiple communities, environmental justice communities here in Virginia, fighting against proposed extension of landfills or new power plants, right? An example is the Charles City County landfill in Charles City County. And you can watch our live show episode with community members to learn more about their efforts in stopping the proposed mega landfill in their county. Another landfill, which is also being proposed, is in Cumberland County, and is threatening the Pipe Grove Elementary School in the Pine Grove community. That school is a historically landmark and a beloved community space for the Pine Grove community, as well as the residents that live there and grew up there and appreciate the history of Pine Grove, right? And we also are continuously fighting against the Mountain Valley Pipeline that's going through various counties in the Southwest Virginia, as well as, our friends in Roanoke. And pipelines and power plants are the biggest source of water pollution in the county, and they use water for cooling. They use up to 1 billion gallons each day for cooling. And this water will be discharged back into the James River, causing pollution to occur in all of our water resources. Additionally, pipelines and power plants frequently create erosion and mudslides, which ultimately increase pollution and sedimentation in waterways, right? And this can also happen even after a pipeline has been canceled and disrupted. And this is an example that we see with the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. Even after a year of its cancellation, folks are still fighting sedimentation in their waterways. And another example is our airports and distribution centers. There are large contributors to surface and stormwater runoff, and pollutants can be obtained and run down into local streams or seep into groundwater if they're not properly maintained. And the Hanover County Municipal Airport in Brown Grove community in Hanover is another issue that we've kind of discussed on our show before with the Brown Grove community. You can also watch our show to learn more. And yeah, so those are a couple of examples, and we are continuously raising up these issues because we are people of faith, right? And water has a huge connotation to multiple faiths. And as a person of faith, right, I approach water as a privilege and as a sacred thing. And water is a gift from earth and necessary for survival of life, right? And when we call ourselves source of creation and the resources of earth, water is a part of that, and protecting and advocating for water is a part of that. Yeah.
And advocating for our neighbors who are most vulnerable to losing that water access. That's also a part of that, I feel. And I think that's also why we feel so passionately about it, because we recognize that all these issues that we've listed so far as examples, and we haven't even gotten to the bottom of the list yet, which is crazy because we've already said so much. But all of these issues are affecting primarily minority groups, low income communities, communities of color. So this is very much in the same way we have an energy burden, there are various ways that we see water burden existing throughout the state as well. And I think before we leave off of this question, we can't talk about threats to water access and water justice issues in the state without talking about flooding. So in Virginia, the coastal region, I'm sure everyone at this point has heard due to effects of climate change, sea levels in the Hampton Roads region have risen about 14 inches since 1950 in Virginia. We actually have a graph here, yes, that shows this progression in inches. It's a bit difficult to see the years at the bottom, but just know that it starts at 1950 and brings us here to 2021. And it has risen in price 14 inches since 1950, repeating that again, which is not normal at all by any means. Forcing people to leave their homes and also have to deal with tons of flood mitigation, navigating that on a real day, like everyday life, having to drive in roads where flooding is happening. This is a real issue. Also in communities, once again, in communities of color. Not to mention, yes, that we see flooding in the Hampton Roads area, but we also see flooding in areas here in the central region, in Richmond, specifically in the south side of Richmond. Past where the flood wall is, there's even flooding sometimes in Shockoe Bottom, if people are familiar with that area, Shockoe Bottom, Churchill area. Also, these are community where the most flooding is happening. These are also areas where people of color live, particularly Black people. So this is a really great example that we actually have to show is just a couple of weeks ago, we were able to learn a little bit more about what's happening with water in Petersburg. And we were actually able to see how someone's backyard actually, after every rain, the person who was showing us this was able to share with us that after every rain, there's usually some sort like a total pond that exists in this person's backyard and her neighbor's backyard. I'm not sure if you can tell from the photo, but you see a lighter space, like a lighter grass area where it looks like the grass hasn't grown in. And next to it, you'll see the tree and then more grass. However, it's hard to tell from the photo, but it's very muddy back there. And to think that that whole area is flooded is crazy, right? What's even crazier is that apparently the city of Petersburg thought that they would be able to alleviate the flooding that was occurring in the backyard of this neighborhood, in the backyards of this neighborhood, with a ditch with I think was about a foot deep. So clearly, I think there is some work that needs to be done, funds that need to be invested in communities to update water infrastructure that already exists, but also apply but also create proper drainage for the flooding that is occurring, and the water infrastructure that does not exist, to alleviate that and make sure that there is no flood and a rising pond in your backyard that could ultimately create all types of funguses rising from your house setting in water all of the time, which is how high the water was. You could see the water level on the person's house of how high it could actually get following a rain. It was just that day, it was blistering hot. So we weren't able to see that live and in action, but these are some of the real issues that people are facing.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Before we move on to the next question, I wanted to quickly plug an event that's happening this Monday in the Petersburg region, August 6th. Actually, that might be Tuesday. I have to double check. But That event is happening for folks and residents living in the city of Petersburg. As we mentioned, Petersburg has been experiencing lots of flooding. And this event will be for the community to talk about their experiences as well as share their ideas for flood control. And we will post that link for some details of the event on our Facebook page. You can also find it on our website and everywhere and it's right up on the screen right now. And now that pushes us to our next question. One of the ideas about what can we do when we hear about all these issues, when we hear about what's going on, what can you do? And can you explain a little bit about what the human right to water is and what that means for communities experiencing these issues?
Yeah, sure. So, specifically, just addressing what the human right to water is. Um, Basically, we can see water as essential for life, as we stated earlier today. The reasons are clear why every human deserves the right to clean water. It's a part of human dignity to have access to such an essential resource. We need it, right? Last year during or actually this year, I'm moving ahead of myself. Um, this year, just in 2021, during the Virginia General Assembly, we were able to, in collaboration with Food and Water Watch, lead an effort to pass the Human Right to Water Resolution, which was sponsored by Delegate Ayer. This resolution presents that water is a human right. And as we saw with the realities of the COVID-19 pandemic, it's just really exacerbated and amplified the critical importance of water as a quality of life issue, right? So, in a lot of cases, we see that for some residents, access to clean and affordable drinking water really is the difference between sickness and health, or life and death in some cases. Um, so we are definitely with this resolution. We were pushing against the idea that so many Virginians across the state have been and continue to be locked out of uh, equitable water sources due to affordability challenges and the other burdens placed on them because of environmental regulation or environmental injustice, basically. So I think that's what the human right to water is. And as we move away from the resolution, we're building upon that effort. That was only a first step in that campaign. Um, and I think this is definitely a multi-step process. The resolution is not a law, and it's not binding. This resolution specifically is not binding. So that is something that we are pushing for long term.
Yeah, so you mentioned that this campaign started last year. Can you tell us a little bit more about what's happening with this effort now and what actions we can do to support?
Absolutely. So I'll share just a couple of things. Most importantly, right now, I think the most important thing to do upon building upon the resolution is really just educating our everyday Virginians, not not everyday Virginians, but all people in the state, right, about these issues. Because as we stated earlier today, we see that a lot of the times people don't even recognize all of the different water issues that exist within the state, whether that be from antiquated infrastructure to flooding. There's a whole array of issues that burdens multiple communities, right? So we find that we really just need to, one of the first steps following the resolution is really just an educational effort, and getting people to share their stories so we can get a deeper understanding of what's really going on and the type of issues that people are facing in a real way. And I think that will allow us, hearing stories will allow us will allow people in the space to speak out for our most vulnerable neighbors. So, with that being said, one of the first actions that we are really encouraging folks to take is to share their water stories, share your experiences with water. This really helps to deepen our understanding of the issues and really put um, facts and stats, these issues to real life, right? We need this educational effort. We need to hear these experiences so that one, people across the state know that they are not alone facing water issues. We know that a lot of times this can be kind of a delicate topic because water is something that people feel embarrassed to live without, and I think that's understandable, right? However, it is such a huge issue that this is definitely something we need to come together on and hopefully learn from. And so I know we put it in our comments. I think we also have the banner where you can share your water stories going across the bottom right now. At that link, you can share whether you or you know someone in your community um, or a neighboring community who has experienced any of the issues that we mentioned today, whether that be affordability issues or pollutants from industry threatening access to water or flooding. Please share your stories, and you are allowed to remain anonymous if you choose to do so. Kadesta, you want to share anything else? Like, we have a couple of other things. Kadesta, you want to share?
Yes, you can also support our petition where we are rising up the water justice in Virginia, and that banner should come up soon. You can always use supporters to contact the General Assembly as we push forward our efforts to raise up the human right to water. And this year, we're specifically, targeting the General Assembly just in generally to ask them to, pay priority to water issues, right? Because we have all these issues happening, especially with infrastructure being the main focus in our country right now. Water should also be a part of that conversation, right? So please make sure you support that effort and sign on to our petition. And also, like you said, I really want to encourage folks to share their water stories as quick as, like I did earlier, can be as short as 2 seconds. Well, not 2 seconds, 2 minutes, or it can be as long as 5 minutes, 10 minutes. We're here to listen your stories and, use them as a tool to get attention to the issue, right? It's as Leah mentioned, a lot of the problem with water justice and water injustices are that a lot of folks don't know whether there are all these funds available, or a lot of folks don't know that these shouldn't be issues that they're facing, right? So we want to hear your stories so that folks know that these are happening. And yeah,
I think also we have to mention that one of the best things about all of the resources that we have to share today is that we have one resource that puts all of this information in one place, as well as how to take action with our water website, web pages. Also being put in the comments and hopefully on the screen in a banner. On the You can see it actually on this flyer. Maybe we see a link to the water stories and our sign-on letter. And here on the banner at the bottom, you see the link to our general campaign where you can learn more about the water justice issues that exist in Virginia, the issue, what the human right to water means, the resolution, as well as the water stories, the place for you to share your water stories and to sign on to our letter. So all of that is in one space for you. And as well as this awesome graphic here, hopefully you all at home can see it. But it does give kind of an overview of a lot of the things that we were able to talk about today in regards to the threats to water access that people in Virginia are facing today, including landfills, power plants, airports, pipelines, distribution centers, and antiquated infrastructure. This right here is just a great infographic covering all of the issues that we talked about today. So please also check out all of these awesome resources that we were able to share with you all today, as well as all of this information, because it's definitely a lot to take in. And myself, as I've learned more about water issues, have only learned that it only gets deeper. We keep finding out more and more and more about the need to address water injustice in the state. So please help us in this effort.
Yes, please make sure you click on all the links available in the comments. We have made sure all the links that were showed as banners are in the comments, so feel free to navigate through the links and help us raise up water justice.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you both for sharing. I just want to reiterate what y'all said already, that if I know we threw a lot of information and a lot of links and resources at y'all, but again, if you need one place to check them all out, they're on our website, which is vaipl.org/water. That is the page for anything water related to our campaign. We'll have this episode on there, some other episodes, a bunch of resources, so definitely check that out. And I want to thank you all again for joining us today. It was lovely hearing from Kades and Leah about the history of this movement and what we've come to today, and then also getting some steps of what we can do next. Thank you all again, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day and your weekend as well.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye, everyone.